Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on Facebook Live, YouTube, and Twitter. As always, I'm Bryson Carver. Who do we got a show for you guys today? My man Alfred Parsard Jr. from the Metropolitan Report is going to join the show to talk about the ALCS between my Red Sox and the Houston Astros, as well as tonight's Game 5, decisive Game 5. Two 100-win teams within the same division. The San Francisco Giants, the LA Dodgers, win or go home, man. So a 100-win team, their season is going to come to an end tonight, as well as other headlines in the world of baseball. But speaking of the Red Sox, what happened on Monday night?
On an 0-1 pitch, Hernandez lifts one to left center field. It is pulled in by Meadows. Here comes Santana. The Red Sox onto the championship series.
Woo! On to the championship series, baby. On to Houston, and I'm going to predict that series as well as Dodgers-Giants. I have a feeling that regardless of who advances, the outcome will be the same against the Atlanta Braves. Also, later in the show, I'm going to predict tonight's Tampa Bay-Eagles game. I actually think it's going to be closer than a lot of people out there might think. As well as to finish the show, USA Today last week ranked their top 75 players in NBA history. And so I'm going to rank my top 75. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to bore y'all with that. I'm going to rate my top 10 compared to the USA Today's top 10. My top 10 basketball players of all time, ladies and gentlemen. I did my top 15 NBA players currently about a month and a half, 2 months ago. I'm going to do my top 10 players of all time just days before the 2021-2022 NBA season begins. But first, how else could we start the show except the obvious? Jon Gruden is no longer the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, to start Friday's show, we talked about Jon Gruden. The news from the AP broke minutes before the show started, so I reacted to that, and all we knew at the time was that Jon Gruden had made a racial remark about DeMaurice Smith's facial features. We later found out exactly what he said about DeMaurice Smith, which I'll get into as we go on in the segment. On Monday, just hours before he resigned, we learned more things about what Jon Gruden had said, not only about black people, but about women, about gay people, about the NFL trying to keep concussions down, essentially. So I'll start with Jon Gruden's statement. According to Adam Schefter from Monday night, Jon Gruden, quote, "I have resigned as the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. I love the Raiders and do not want to be a distraction. Thank you to all the players, coaches, staff, and fans of Raider Nation. I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt anyone." So that was his statement. And so here we are. And simply put, Jon Gruden should be gone. There is no doubts about it. Because as more and more and more started to come out about what he said in these emails, which, by the way, we only thought was from 2011. That was what the initial report said. Then here comes the New York Times, and you find out that the emails have spanned from 2011 all the way to 2018, when he started back as, at the time, the Oakland Raiders head coach. And so I think it's really interesting that this has all come out, because Jon Gruden, how did the NFL find these emails? They just want to look at Jon Gruden's emails? Not necessarily. They happen to stumble upon it. Why? Because they are investigating the Washington football team for the sexual misconduct allegations made by multiple cheerleaders. Through one of the executives that used to work for the Washington football team, a guy by the name of Bruce Allen, who is close friends with Jon Gruden, the NFL came upon these emails between Bruce Allen and Jon Gruden. Jon Gruden, by the way, also showed pornographic images of cheerleaders. So it goes to show you he's a creep. That's what it goes to show you. But what did he say specifically? Now, of course, some of the things I will not repeat verbatim because it is just nasty. But he often called Commissioner Roger Goodell a gay slur that is used as a slur toward gay people. He called Roger Goodell that and a clueless anti-football blank. Not going to finish that. He also used homophobic slurs to describe NFL owners, coaches, and reporters who cover the league. So, per the New York Times, Gruden and Allen also sometimes included Ed Droste, I hope I'm saying that name right, the founder of Hooters, Jim McVeigh, an executive who has run the Outback Bowl, and Nick Reeder, the founder of PDQ Restaurants, in the emails. Okay, and per the Times in 2017, Drost sent Gruden an email. Drost, the president of Hooters, I guess, sent Jon Gruden a meme about women being officials in the NBA, or excuse me, in the NFL. To which Jon Gruden replied, quote, "Nice job, Roger." Obviously in reference to the commissioner. Now, let's start with that. Let's start from the first thing. So, Jon Gruden apparently believed that women were not capable of being officials in the National Football League. I don't know where that came from. To what evidence would Jon Gruden or anybody for that matter have that, you know what? Male officials are just better than female officials, you know? At one point has that went through anybody's mind? Any reasonable football fan, like if an official threw a flag, like, oh, she only threw a flag because she's a woman and that man wouldn't have done it. Like, what? Like, what has to go through your mind to think that women cannot officiate NFL games? That's just stupid. It's dumb. It's archaic is what it is. So he also criticized back in 2015 a congressional bill that attempted to force Washington to change its name from the old team name. Okay, so you had that. He also targeted former St. Louis Rams, back there in St. Louis, the head coach at the time, Jeff Fisher. He targeted Jeff Fisher because he drafted Michael Sam, who at the time was the first openly gay player to ever be drafted into the National Football League. Said Jeff Fisher was being pressured to draft, and that's another homophobic slur. And Jeff Fisher replied, basically, no, we just drafted him because he thought, he'd fit our football team. I think it's really, I kind of, in a cryptic way, I was like, wow, how crazy is that? That Jon Gruden, who feels this way about that community, had now the first openly gay player to play in the NFL in Carl Nassib. And poor Carl Nassib, I heard Mike Mayock, the general manager of the team, who's in a really bad position. Remember, Mike Mayock didn't hire Jon Gruden. The former GM McKenzie was part of the Gruden hiring process. And trust me, I'll get to Mark Davis a little later. But Mike Mayock said in his press conference yesterday, yeah, Carl had to take the day off. And who can blame him? Because when you know your locker room, and every report out of the Raiders locker room was like, yeah, his teammates have embraced him. They're like, yeah, you're with us. We're with you. The courage that you showed. And that's how my head coach felt about me. That's awful interesting. And so he also again criticized the National Football League for going through certain protocols to try and prevent head injuries. Yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea that the NFL did that. A study came out recently that I think it was from UCLA, if I'm not mistaken, it was from UCLA. They studied all of these football players' brains. 99% of professional football players had CTE, which was, as we all know, was a big topic of discussion, a few years ago. And 91% of college football players had CTE. And Jon Gruden's like, man, whatever. Yeah, you're ruining the game. I hear that a lot. Football's become softer. Now, you can maybe argue I've heard debate on the new, well, it's not that new, but relatively new roughing the passer rule, right? Like you can't land on top of the quarterbacks. In some respects, I agree with it. In others, I don't. But we should all agree, we don't want too many helmet-to-helmet hits out there. We don't want two grown men in pads running full speed at one another, hitting each other in the helmet, in the head. That's probably better that it doesn't happen than if it does. So when you're hearing all this, you're like, this dude has, I used this word before, but an archaic belief about football and just about life. What went through Jon Gruden's head is that if people weren't exactly like him, then we're just going to call them names. You know, what makes America great, what makes it the greatest country in the whole wide world, is that we are the melting pot. The NFL, for all my criticisms of them, they have made good progress. They've hired female officials. They went through certain initiatives to, target sexism and even homophobia. Now, racism, probably a different story, but we'll see if they eventually come around in that regard. But I think it's funny when you compare Jon Gruden to the head coach that just won the Super Bowl, Bruce Arians. What did Bruce Arians do? Bruce Arians is a guy older than Jon Gruden. He's older than him by probably about 15 years or so. I mean, Bruce Arians is pushing 70. Gruden's like in his mid-50s. Bruce Arians, a kid from rural Alabama, down south. All three of his coordinators are African-American. He has, I think, two, maybe three women on his coaching staff. And what did Bruce Arians say about that whole deal? He talked about, is she qualified or is he qualified? Then we're going to hire them. What a concept, you know? What a concept, hiring the most qualified person for the job. Imagine if we did that more often. And for the most part, the majority of football fans and non-football fans, because this has been, I've checked the media. This has been a bigger story than just in the sports realm. All the big networks, all the cable news networks, all the news networks are talking about it. Overwhelmingly, it's been like, yeah, you can't have that guy leading a locker room. There have been segments, though, that have thought otherwise. They've said it's cancel culture. It's cancel. They're canceled Jon Gruden. All right, well, not really two. It's really one big point. Cancel culture is if somebody makes a mistake and we deem them unforgivable, we're not going to give them a second chance. That's cancel culture. But if somebody makes a mistake, think about Drew Brees last summer. Drew Brees screwed up in what he said. But we know about Drew Brees' track record is that he doesn't say stuff like that, right? He's not about, he's helped so many people in the black community after Hurricane Katrina. I mean, he won the Walter Payton Man of the Year. He's a hero to that city. So what happens after he makes that mistake? He comes out days later, apologizes, and has been a part of organizations with some of his now former Saints teammates, because he's retired now, obviously, to fight systemic racism, to fight, the gap between the rich and the poor, like helping people in need. Drew Brees learned from his mistake and became a better man for it. Richard Sherman could have done something really, really horrible at his in-laws' house. Thankfully, did not get through that door. Richard Sherman is right now being given a second chance by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And time will tell. But what does Richard Sherman's history tell us? It's not the kind of human being he is. He doesn't have a violent personality or a criminal record or anything of that sort. That's why his wife went to such great lengths to defend him. Jon Gruden, this is a repeated history. This is 7 years, 650,000 emails. In 2021, the NFL, you can't lead a locker room. You can't. And so back to the Bruce Arians point, I'm done with this excuse. Well, it's because they were from a different time period. No. Eventually, they're your beliefs, not just those who raised you. Now, listen, I'm sure Bruce Arians was raised by excellent, had an excellent support system growing up. And not saying Jon Gruden did not. But it goes to my point of when you become an adult and as you age, you start forming beliefs about how you believe the world should work. And Jon Gruden's philosophy, his thinking about how the world should work is vastly different than how many in the NFL believe it should. So, and let me mention one more thing. Mark Davis. Mark Davis is the owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. Mark Davis is also a coward. Plain and simple. Because what has he done? Well, first of all, he's done nothing. But in his silence, he has deferred to others. Mike Mayock, you do the press conferences. Even though you didn't hire Jon Gruden. You were hired after Jon Gruden to be the general manager of this football team. Derek Carr, Josh Jacobs, the rest of the Raiders roster, you answer the questions about Jon Gruden. Mark Davis is the son of the late Al Davis, one of the most iconic owners in NFL history. Al Davis, ladies and gentlemen, was a man ahead of his time. Al Davis had sort of the Bruce Arians style of thinking. If they're qualified, we give them the job. The Raiders were the first team to have a Latino player on the roster. That same guy became the head coach, first Latino head coach. They had the first black coach in the NFL, and they had the first female general manager. Amy Trask, who I heard talking about this the other day. She was talking about if this had happened under her watch, yeah, Jon Gruden's not going to be in the silver and black too much longer. And so, listen, I'm hearing people say, well, I didn't know this was in Jon Gruden. I didn't know he was capable of this. Well, of course he didn't. They're reading emails. You know what I'm saying? So what it goes to show you, and I talked about this a little bit on Monday, but I'll continue that. It's not like Jon Gruden made a split second, like, I'm mad, so I go to this hurtful term, or I insult this group of people. This is over the course of 7-8 years. This is in multiple thousands of emails. He had the time to type it out on his computer and hit that send button. So he had time to think this over. And this is how he was comfortable talking around his friends. And so something else that I don't think should go under the radar too much, and I feel like it's finally starting to get a little bit of media attention. Remember how they found the Jon Gruden emails? An investigation into the Washington football team. And I saw Washington today, after years of delaying it, is now going to retire Sean Taylor, the late Sean Taylor's number 21. Something that fans have been calling for them to do for years. Sean Taylor was a great player who was tragically murdered at the age of 24 in his own house. And still haven't retired 21. Now they're going to do it. Funny that now that they're in the news again for not a good reason, it's a little distraction. Oh, we're going to retire Sean Taylor's number. So let's make sure we don't forget about that. So Jon Gruden should have been fired. There is no question he should have been fired. And no, he is not a victim of cancel culture. This is a repeated behavior over the course of multiple years and thousands of emails. I mean, do you listen, do you want somebody with those beliefs who frankly isn't even that great at their job leading your company if they were your boss? The reason I said Jon Gruden's not that good. He's 21-32 as the Raiders head coach. He's lost 11 more games than he's won. and he has these beliefs, please, can't be a part of this organization. Can't. It goes to show you if you're stuck in your ways and you've got this is the way it is, the world will move on without you. Well, you know, it's not just going to be about people. I hope Jon Gruden learns from this. I hope he does some work on himself. And down the road, we'll see. We'll see. So, it's kind of my thoughts on that. Before I have my man Alfred on the show, let me talk about Kyrie Irving a little bit. I'm going to have Alfred on here to talk about Major League Baseball. And listen, the playoffs have gotten just crazy. We've already had an upset featuring my Boston Red Sox. I'm 0-3 on my picks. I'm praying that the Dodgers win tonight, man. I can't go 0-4 in the division series. I can't do it. That can't. Jeez. Anyways, Kyrie Irving. So, Kyrie, as we all know, he's I think he's made that abundantly clear. He ain't getting the vaccine. Of course, we all know New York has a mandate for public businesses, for private businesses rather, to have that they have to have a vaccine mandate, right? You got to be vaccinated to enter the building. That's why you heard me talk at length a couple weeks ago about the whole Andrew Wiggins situation. I'm a Warriors fan, so that one really ticked me off. And Andrew Wiggins, thankfully, begrudgingly, but thankfully, got the vaccine. The Nets came out a few days ago and said, you know what? If Kyrie can't be available for half our games until he gets vaccinated, he's not going to be available for any of our games. So last night, Kyrie Irving went on Instagram Live and was talking about he's trying to clarify and saying that trying to clear the media narrative, I guess. And here's what he said.
Don't believe that I'm retiring. Don't believe that, I'm going to give up this game for a vaccine mandate or staying unvaccinated.
Okay, so first of all, that's actually good news for the Brooklyn Nets. Like, that's really, really good news. Because now you know, because we talked about, man, they might not be able to trade him now. Well, now they can. Now, the Nets cannot be paralyzed by trying to get equal value for Kyrie Irving. Because chances are they're not. The contending teams want nothing to do with him. I mean, Philadelphia does not have a vaccine mandate to this point. Now, Ben Simmons is back, but even they were like, no. You can have Kyrie Irving. We'll have the guy that refuses to shoot in the fourth quarter. You can have him, right? So the contending team's not going to trade for Kyrie, but the Oklahoma Cities, the Sacramentos, the New Orleans of the world, they'll be interested. Why? They're desperate franchises. Frankly, they're not very well-run franchises. Oklahoma City is well-run, but they're in a rebuild. You get what I'm saying. Teams that just need to sell tickets. They'll go get Kyrie because, listen, that man can sell tickets. He's must-see TV. So that's good news for the Nets. They can trade him. He's not going to retire, and they don't have to just eat that albatross of a contract, right? But an article from the New York Times came out. I was talking about this whole Kyrie situation, and Kyrie said in that IG Live, we didn't play the clip because there was some language in it, but it was also clarified in this article that he's doing this not because he's anti-vax, but because he's wanting to stand up for those who have lost their job due to vaccine mandates. Now, first of all, I don't really know how he's like standing up for them because they go home and they're jobless. He's at least got an endorsement with Nike and other companies, and at the very least, he'd make $18 million a year from the Nets. So I don't think you can really compare those two situations. But he talked about he's standing up for the voiceless. I'm giving a voice to the voiceless. Now, you know who the voiceless are? You know who they are, Kyrie? At least here in America, 720,000 plus people dead. They're voiceless. They're the voiceless because some of them couldn't get the vaccine, or some of them didn't take the vaccine, and now they're tragically gone. So I don't want to hear about speaking for people that have a decision. to care about their health. I'm done with that mess. So, and he also, it's really interesting. A couple more things. He said he didn't sign up for this. Going into the season, he didn't sign up to try and, have to get this vaccine. Well, neither did really any of us. None of us really signed to be in a global pandemic and even have to have the option to have to get a vaccine, right? No. Could we have, 2019, could any of us have seen this coming? Of course not. And so to say, I didn't sign up for this. Genius, none of us did. You think the healthcare workers in these hospitals that watch people die day in and day out, you think they signed up for this? You think people, let's stay in the NBA, Karl Anthony Towns, who lost his mother and 8 other family members due to this horrible virus, you think he signed up for this? You think the people that died signed up for this? It all goes back to making a selfish decision. And speaking of selfish, this is a team game, and we all know the Nets. Does anybody, maybe the Lakers, but does anybody have higher expectations for themselves as a basketball team to win a championship than the Brooklyn Nets? And answer's probably no. You've got Kevin Durant, James Harden, and for the moment, Kyrie Irving, even though he's not in your building right now. James Harden has not won any championships, and didn't necessarily hold back when talking about Kyrie Irving.
Conversations, Sean, Steve, me, KD, Kyrie, we all had conversations. Kyrie believes in his beliefs, and he stands firm and strong on that. And for us, we respect it. We all love Kai, but as far as us, we have a job to do. And individually myself, I'm still, wanting to set myself up for a championship. And I feel like the entire organization is on the same path, and we're always, as a collective unit. So we'll keep pushing forward, and we'll try to, do our best every single day to get better and keep growing as a collective unit.
Have you talked to Kyrie since?
No, I haven't talked to him.
Interesting. James Harden has not talked to Kyrie Irving. Now, I've had my criticisms of James Harden on this show. Y'all know that. His not so impressive playoff record. But I'll say this about James Harden. He's always healthy. He's committed. And he's willing to do whatever it takes to win basketball games. The problem is he just hasn't showed up in the playoffs. Kyrie, I would take in a heartbeat over James Harden in the playoffs for one game, but he gets hurt more than Harden does. You don't know if he's just going to skip games randomly. Harden doesn't do that. James Harden's like, okay, this is my best chance to win a championship. I don't want to go down in the Karl Malone category of great scorers who never won a ring, where there's almost like not an asterisk, but like a but to their career. Feels like there's that with this. Look at the head coach of the team, Steve Nash. Steve Nash's and the John Stocktons, the Karl Malones, and the Charles Barkleys, where it's like they had a great career, but they didn't win a championship. James don't want to be a part of that group. KD feared being a part of that group. That's why he went to Golden State. And, he went to Brooklyn because he wanted to prove people, hey, I can win without a completely, stacked basketball team with 3 other Hall of Famers. Like I want to win a championship where people can say KD led that team to a ring. So KD wants to do this. And he's 33, 34 years old. He ain't got forever. And here's Kyrie with this nonsense. And last point, probably the most ironic, that it's funny, the same crowd saying, yeah, Kyrie, you tell him, Kyrie, that's the same crowd overwhelmingly that when it came to systemic racism and police brutality that told Kyrie Irving to shut up and dribble. Because athletes aren't articulate enough and not smart enough to speak on these issues. Stick to sports, they say. Unless you agree with me. Now, if you agree with me, here we go. Yeah, you give the voice to the voiceless, right? But if you don't, keep your mouth shut. I'm just saying. So I've made this clear. The Nets I've said for weeks the Nets need to trade Kyrie Irving. But this is something. Before I get to Alfred, a comment here from my man Barry Grant Jr. Shouts to him from the All Even podcast. He says, there is nothing more frustrating than listening to a person that believes they know it all or they are the smartest guy in the room. He is turning 30 at some point. His game will decline and bye. The Nets are going to trade him. Kyrie Irving has played his last game as a Brooklyn Net. I think that's pretty much been established. He's not moving on this. He's not Andrew Wiggins. We all know how Kyrie Irving operates. He's going to stay put on this. So, question is, where does he get traded? NBA Siberia is a perfect place for him. Pennies under the dollar. That's why I mentioned. For those of you that don't know, Barry refers to the Sacramento Kings as NBA Siberia. You could certainly make that same case for teams like I mentioned, the Pelicans and whatnot. Okay, so October is always the wildest month for sports. There's no question. The NHL season just started a couple days ago. You've got the WNBA Finals, by the way, which if you're not watching that, you need to. It's been amazing. You got the NFL season. College football's in full swing. You got basketball starting in days, less than a week. And you got probably the highlight of it all, MLB postseason. And with that, once again, let me bring on my man, Alfred Parsard Jr., host of the Metropolitan Report. Alfred, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, Bryson. It's good to be back. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm doing even better because my Red Sox are in the ALCS. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I wanted to start real quick with some news we got in baseball a few hours ago. That the Arizona Cardinals, the St. Louis Cardinals, have fired their manager. What's your reaction to that? And do you think it was the right move by St. Louis?
I was very, very surprised that the Cardinals got rid of Mike Shildt for one reason. In September, the beginning of September, nobody expected them to get a wild card spot. If you remember, September 1st, if you go back in the standings and look, the Cincinnati Reds had that second wild card spot underneath the Dodgers. Nobody expected the Cardinals to grab that. And then not only do the Cardinals grab it, but what did they do in September? They won 17 in a row. Won 17 in a row with an unproven team of guys like Tyler O'Neill and Harrison Bader and Tommy Edman, of all people. And, I was just, wow. And Adam Wainwright, at 40 years old, 17-game winner. So he had Arenado and Goldschmidt with solid seasons. So the fact that they fired Mike Shildt is a head scratcher because at the beginning of the season, they weren't even picked as the favorite to win their division. Neither were the Brewers. Everybody thought the Cubs would have had it. But, St. Louis wasn't expected to contend. And to their credit, they got to the wild card game. And the way he even managed the wild card game, I know they lost by 2 runs, but nobody would have expected with 2 outs, Chris Taylor would have smacked one over the fence. So when I saw that today, I was floored. I was dumbfounded. I tell you this, whoever they get as the next manager needs to be have better results than Mike Shildt had this year. Because if I were a GM and I saw what this guy did down the stretch, he would have had job security.
It's really interesting that they made the move this quickly. Do you think it had anything to do with the fact that they had gotten off to the slow start and they just had one big magical stretch in September? Do you think that had anything to do with that? Because they did have a talented roster.
I don't think it had anything to do with them starting the year slow. Even though they did lead the division for that first month of the season, then they fell and they got the wild card. That performance to pick it back up, that would have been enough for him to keep his job if I were the GM of the Cardinals. And it's a surprise move because where did they get eliminated last week?
Yeah.
So and again, it's not like they got blown out. No, and I don't think any expert in baseball picked them to beat the Dodgers. And if you did pick them to beat the Dodgers, they almost did. The game was 1-1 going into the bottom of the 9th. Cody Bellinger walks with 2 outs. And then the next batter, Chris Taylor, walk-off home run. That's more on Alex Reyes, the closer, than it is on Mike Shildt. So, I disagree with that move heavily.
I'm going to be really interesting, like you said, to see who they to see who they replace him with, especially being in that division with the Brewers, who get to the playoffs year in and year out. You've got the Cubs, who are in a rebuild, but that's a really interesting division moving forward, no question. Let's stay in that division because I want to give you a ton of credit. You were all in on the Atlanta Braves going into the series. You were all in. You picked Atlanta to win the series, and obviously runs were rare. I mean, they were hard to come by because of the outstanding pitching by both ball clubs. And obviously, you had the dramatic moment in Game 4, Freddie Freeman smacking one over the fence in the 8th inning. What was your reaction to this series, and do you think the Braves have a chance to be either the winner of tonight's game, the Giants or the Dodgers?
So my reaction, I wasn't surprised because that's a heavy slugging lineup, from Freddie Freeman to Jorge Soler to Adam Duvall to Ozzie Albies to Travis d'Arnaud. Like you're not gonna. I feel like offensively they were the better team. Because again, you look at Milwaukee, and like you said, the pitching was great, but that's all Milwaukee has is pitching. As we've seen with my New York Mets, you could have the greatest pitcher in the world pitch, but if you can't score any runs on offense, it's not going to do anything for you. So again, I'll reiterate, Christian Yelich on the decline. Other guys like Keston Hiura is not panning out. Tyrone Taylor, like all those guys can't hit. Jackie Bradley Jr. has never been an offensive guy. So the fact that they got one game out of it, I was surprised. I was expecting a sweep, but I had no doubt in my mind that the Braves won. To answer the second part of your question, if the Dodgers win, I don't think the Braves beat them. If the Giants win, I think the Braves go to the World Series.
Really? So you think?
Yes, sir.
That's interesting, man. You're dropping that hot take. We'll get back to Dodgers Giants in just a second because you want to talk about an elimination game tonight. That's what we all wanted between these two. Let's stay with the hot take that you had, and I kind of jumped on the bandwagon with you, and it crashed the other night against the Houston Astros, and that was of course the Chicago White Sox against at least a starting pitching staff that the Astros have, which is good but not overwhelming. What happened?
The Astros wanted it more. That's what it was. That's the way it looked to me in watching those games. Dusty Baker is a heck of a manager. He managed to give the White Sox a real whooping. To their credit, the White Sox pulled out one win where they came back down from 6 runs.
Yeah.
So you got to give them credit. This is their second consecutive first round bump out of the postseason. Of course, last year they got eliminated in the first round as well. But the White Sox will be back if they keep that core of Anderson, Jimenez, Abreu, and Luis Robert and Grandal. They'll be back. But I'm not gonna lie here. I have no dog in the fight, but I rather the Red Sox than the Astros to go to the World Series. That's what I'm rooting for.
I think you're right there with me, man. But I read a report from me Russo was coming back. Do you think that is the right move to bring him back? Listen, for our criticism of him as far as the old school mindset, do you think they need to do you think he served it more as the transitional manager to the next guy, or do you think he is the guy that can lead this team to a world championship in the future?
So as far as Tony La Russa goes, you look at his resume. You can't take away his resume. He's managed 3 World Series teams. Now, granted, those teams that he managed, he had the Oakland A's when the Bash brothers, Canseco and McGuire were there. He had 2 St. Louis Cardinals teams with a prime Yadier Molina and a prime Albert Pujols and a prime Adam Wainwright. So, I mean, what manager, and it's very rare unless you find like a Joe Torre. Like, there's no manager still living today who has more than 3 World Series on his resume. I don't think. So, I mean, I get it that the old school ways, because a lot of things don't age well in 2021, Bryson. I know you were bringing up cancel culture with Coach Gruden earlier in the show, but a lot of things from back then don't age well today. And I don't know if La Russa is a manager that the players are happy to play for. We saw what happened with Yermin Mercedes back early in the season, and then a couple other players, to the point that Tim Anderson had to go on Instagram and go against Tony La Russa. So, I mean, but he's obviously doing something right if he got the most out of his players to win the division. So, if we're looking at it from a results standpoint, I say keep him. If you're looking at him from a politically correct or we have to do right by the players, then get rid of them. But can you really justify getting rid of a guy who just got you to win the division for a second straight year in a row? So
it's fair. I mean, I do remember, though, and I don't know if there was anything else that contributed to this, but when the Yankees let go of Joe Girardi after they made that pretty surprising run all the way to the ALCS where they lost to the cheating Astros in 2017, it wouldn't have stunned me. I mean, we all know Tim Anderson is one of the most exuberant players in baseball, and certainly there's other guys in that clubhouse as well that I'm sure were not. I felt like there was a big locker room or a big clubhouse turnoff rather when that whole thing with Yerwin Mercedes went down. But I think the tough part about it, that's not that good of a division. I mean, it's just not. The White Sox are far and away the best team. I mean, they won, I think, by like 10, 11, 12 games. I mean, they clinched the division with 2 weeks to go. So I think it goes to show you the competition for a big chunk of their schedule.
Yeah, well, if you look at that AL Central and the makeup of it, every team that's not the White Sox is rebuilding. The Tigers are rebuilding. The Royals have been rebuilding for what seems like forever.
Yeah.
The Twins are in a rebuild. And I guess the Indians, because the Indians were competitive for most of the season this year until like the final month. So I don't know if we can honestly call that a rebuild, but if you look at the teams for the most part, the White Sox are the class of that division. It's not even close.
Yeah, so we'll see what they do next year. I think if we get the same results next year, I think Lewis is probably gone because they realize they can only go so far. Now, if they get to say the ALCS or even the Fall Classic, I think he's here to stay. Got a comment from our guy Barry. Dodgers will win, on to the World Series. Condolences to the competition. That could end tonight. Listen, it could have ended the other night, and credit to the Dodgers. That offense, and especially the pitching staff, completely came alive. Before we get to the Dodgers, let's talk about my Red Sox a little bit because you completely wrote them off. I picked Tampa to win the series like most people did. It was what stunned me, Alfred, about that series is I told you going in, we were talking during these games, on DMs and texts, and I was thinking what I thought the difference would be is the bullpen of the Rays, which was the best in baseball, and the bullpen of the Red Sox, which limped into the playoffs, and it was a complete opposite. I mean, you guys like Houck and Whitlock, who were outstanding in the series. Why do you think the Rays collapsed so badly after that Game 1 win?
The results of not being a team built for the postseason. Because again, like I mentioned, after their World Series loss last year, they let Charlie Morton walk. They shipped Blake Snell to San Diego. They trade Willie Adames to the Brewers. So all you have left is Randy Arozarena and company, and guys who are not even playoff tested, like Wander Franco, as great as he is in the regular season with that on base streak. The kid is 20 years old. You can't ride on him to win you a playoff series. So, I feel like the Red Sox wanted it more. That was a triumphant, emphatic win over the Yankees. So kudos to you guys because I had the Yankees winning on paper, and you guys in Boston just walloped them. And then the momentum just happened to carry. And that's sometimes what happens with these wild card playing games. You build momentum from one game, and it carries you to the next throughout the series. So, and also Boston's offense, you guys woke up. So that's, again, when the pitching is not there and the bats are waking up on the other side, you're in for trouble. And Boston just wanted it more.
Yeah, and I think part of his Kike Hernandez automatically turned into Reggie Jackson with how he played it. He was outstanding from Game 2 on, and it was fitting that he was the guy to end the series. I think I told you a few months ago when you were on the show, I think at the All-Star break, that the Giants reminded me a little bit of the 2013 Red Sox, kind of a bunch of old guys with Carl Yastrzemski's the young guy with that team, and Xander Bogaerts was a kid back in 2013. The superstars, Chris Bryant, the superstar for that team was obviously Big Papi. This Red Sox team, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alfred, minus the gap and how great the team I'm about to mention, their starting pitching was compared to this Red Sox team, the Red Sox remind me a lot of the National from a couple years ago, where the ball seems to bounce your way a little bit. Remember, the Nationals did beat a 100-win Dodgers team in the division series. One could argue that kind of lucked out before that in the wild card game against the Brewers. And you have that just mind-boggling Game 3 in the 13th inning where the ball ricochets off the short fence in right field off Hunter Renfroe that cost Tampa Bay a run and possibly the win, a rule that even as a Red Sox fan I say needs to be changed. I don't want to say team of destiny, but boy, there's sometimes you got to get those bounces, those rolls as an underdog. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe I'm just rambling.
Like I've said to you all year, I feel like this year for the Giants are a fluke team. Nobody in spring training predicted that the Giants were gonna be battling for a pennant, let alone a playoff spot. And again, you look at the makeup of their team, and I said this last week, they're a mix of over-the-hill veterans and prospects that never were and young kids. So what's interesting tonight, they have a chance to beat the Dodgers because I don't know if you saw the report. Corey Knebel is starting for the Dodgers.
They're basically going to go with a bullpen game.
Yep, this is a bullpen game. However, the last time the Dodgers had a bullpen game against the Giants earlier this season, the Dodgers won that game decisively. So I know the playoffs is a different animal, but I don't see the Dodgers losing this one whatsoever. I just don't see it.
So you've got the Dodgers winning tonight. I agree with you. I think it's going to be low scoring. I'll take Dodgers by a score of let's go 5-4. I think it's relatively close. I'm going to go low scoring. Do you have a final score, Alfred?
I've got it 6-3 in favor of the Dodgers. Okay. I will say this much: Julio Urias was available to pitch tonight and was originally scheduled to start, and Dave Roberts pulled him. So that tells me that as a manager, you have faith in your bullpen because I guess they want to save Julio Urias for the NLCS Game 1 should they make it there. And Urias has had a great season. If you need a guy to close out a series, it would have been him that should have started. But I trust Dave Roberts. Dave Roberts has been managing a very long time. The guy won the World Series last year. So, and then the Dodgers are a much more improved team this year than they were last year. So, I gotta take my hat off to Dave Roberts and hope that if this pans out, he's gonna look like a genius. So,
of course. I mean, it's either or, and I think again, I'm not totally ruling out Julio Urias pitching tonight. I mean, he may come out of the pen for 2 to 3 innings or so. Maybe did they throw that possibly out for a Game 1? You'd have to start either Buehler or Scherzer on short rest, but we'll see. But
before you move on. Don't forget last year who clinched the World Series for the Dodgers. It wasn't Kenley Jansen. Julio Urias got that last out in that save in that last game last year. So he can come out of the pen and shut it down. So you have a point.
We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be again. Listen, you got the team with the 2 best records in all of baseball playing a win or go home game. This is what the postseason's all about. Let's talk about the LCS. Let's start with the American League Championship Series, which begins tomorrow night at around 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, between, of course, my Boston Red Sox and the Houston Astros. I think it's safe to say the baseball world's probably rooting for the Red Sox. They'll root for anybody, playing Houston. This isn't a Red Sox love fest. This is just everybody hates Houston. Do you have a prediction for the series? And if so, who wins and in how many games? And what do you think about, real quick, what do you think of the keys to this series?
All right, the keys to this series, honestly, is going to be who could get the better pitching. Of course, you guys have Eovaldi and Sale. The other guys, they have Josh James, Zach Greinke as their top 2. Also, the bats got to wake up because the bats are what carried Boston through not only the wild card game, but that ALDS series against Tampa. I think this is going to go 7 games only because you can't count out the Astros. Yes, the baseball world views them as the scumbag bastards, for lack of a better term, of the American League. But the track record, remember, this is the 5th consecutive ALCS that Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman and Carlos Correa and the rest of those guys have been in. So to make 5 straight ALCSs, that's no easy feat, especially in a sport like baseball. But you guys in Boston, I see the momentum is on your side. you guys handled Tampa better than the Astros handled the White Sox. So that's my prediction there. I think, but I do think it goes 7 games.
So you've got Boston in 7.
Boston in 7.
I'm officially worried now because you picked against us the first 2 series. So now I got to hold my breath a little bit.
Well, hey, you proved me wrong. So
I didn't pick us to win the last series either. I got to be somewhat objective on the show. So I'll go ahead and put my prediction up right here. Red Sox, Astros. Call me biased. I don't care. I'm going to take the Red Sox to win in 6 games. I think I totally agree with you about the starting pitching. What does concern me for the Red Sox is Chris Sale. His last start couldn't have been worse. I mean, it was an absolute disaster in the first inning. Obviously gave up the grand slam to, I believe it was Luplow in left field in the first inning. He's well rested. We know that for a fact. Nate Eovaldi's the only guy in this staff that I feel like I can count on. Rodriguez was excellent in his last start, but he struggled in game 1 against Tampa. But like you said, for Houston, starting pitching, it's not like there's a ton of big names. Zach Greinke is not 2015 Zach Greinke by any stretch of the imagination, or even 2019 Zach Greinke. And Josh James has been there before, but I'll take Nathan Eovaldi over him. And like you said, I think. Listen, that White Sox pitching staff was as good as it got. Tampa Bay in pretty much every pitching metric was first in all of baseball. And so, you're going to have – I think you're going to have a managerial clinic. You got Alex Cora, who's proven himself to be one of the best in baseball, against the old vet Dusty Baker, I'm sorry. And so I do think Boston splits the first I think Boston and Houston split the first 2 games at Minute Maid Park. Boston takes 2 of 3 at home, and then they close it out in Game 6 in Houston like they did a few years ago in the ALCS. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, I think as far as the first 4, I can see a split that's realistic. But and I do agree with you. You bring up a good point. It is going to be a managerial clinic. Again, Alex Cora, who has won a World Series not that long ago, 3 seasons ago to be exact. So he's had a much more recent taste of success than Dusty Baker has. Folks forget Dusty Baker was on the losing side of the 2002 World Series, so I think he'd do his managerial best to get back to a World Series with a chance to win it. And again, Dusty Baker, Hall of Fame manager, he's seen and done it all minus winning a World Series. But I still think the Red Sox, with that momentum that they carried in from the wild card game against the Yankees and that ALDS win against Tampa, I think they have it. It's just going to go down to the wire. That's all.
Man, that'd be an insane. I mean, it's weird. I had before the season started, I had a rematch of 2017. I think it's really what we've all been wanting outside, my Red Sox getting there is a rematch from 2017 and the Dodgers possibly getting redemption against a team that robbed them just 4 years ago. So speaking of the Dodgers, we both believe they're going to beat the Giants. I'll still put up the graphic Dodgers/Giants, but they'll be matching up against the Atlanta Braves, obviously, in the National League Championship Series. The same argument you made for the Red Sox could easily be made for the Atlanta Braves in regards to pitching, in regards to, you got to keep in mind the pitching staff that Milwaukee has. They got the big hits when they needed to get them. What is your prediction for this series if the Dodgers do, in fact, advance?
Should the Dodgers win, I think they go to the World Series. The Braves, now a lot of people sleep on them, and I know you slept on them in the NLDS because they came from the worst division in baseball, the NL East, or as I like to call it in the Metropolitan Report, the NL Least. But I just don't. I think the Dodgers, in every single category you can of baseball, are a better team than the Braves, pitching and hitting. And I think that Dave Roberts is a better manager than Brian Snitker as well. So I just don't see it. I don't see them matching up. I just don't. I mean, yeah, their offense is incredible because, again, Freddie Freeman is Freddie Freeman. But when you're playing without Marcell Ozuna and Ronald Acuna, 2 cornerstones of your offense, I mean, guys like Jorge Soler and Adam Duvall have been great, but they can't fill in those roles when the lights are on and shining bright in it's prime time. So it's a difference between a 1 p.m. game in July and an NLCS game in October. So, I mean, the Dodgers, I outmatched them in every single way. And the Dodgers 1 through 8 and their bench is way more dangerous than the Braves and their starting lineup.
Like you said, I mean, pitching staff, they have the best in baseball, I think, even without Kershaw, which shows you how incredibly deep they are. You talk about a lineup that you cannot take a break. You don't have okay, we got him. No. Any guy can go deep on you any given moment. And I think this is going to be a situation where Braves got there, somewhat of a Cinderella story of sorts, considering they got hot the second half of the season and they took care of Milwaukee in the division series to their credit. But I feel like it's going to be a situation where Dodgers came in, okay, you had your fun. We had to come back on y'all last year from down 3-1. We're not going to be in that position next year. So, excuse me, I'm going to put up the graphic right here. Dodgers, Giants, regardless of who advances, I've got the Dodgers or the Giants winning over the Braves in 6 games. I think there is a reason that both teams won over 100 games. The Braves couldn't even hit 90. And I think ultimately that's the deciding factor. I do think the Braves offense in any given moment can be dangerous, certainly against the Giants pitching staff over the Dodgers. But what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you said you would take the Braves to beat the Giants should San Francisco win tonight.
Yeah, if San Francisco wins, I'm going to go with the Braves again with the upset. I just think the Giants are a fluke team, and eventually they're just going to run out of luck. I don't think they make it all the way, to be honest with you. I would be very shocked if the Giants end up in the World Series, let alone the NLCS past tonight.
It will be something special. And again, I'll tell you, the playoffs just fly by, but this is where it really gets just all out of whack. This is where we, the media, I guess we somewhat count as the media, right? I mean, you're in New York, I'm here in Tennessee. We count. We're second guessing managers. We're second guessing, reviews. I mean, it's gonna be a wild LCS, regardless of what happens. Starting tomorrow in the American League and in the National League, starting I believe on Saturday. And so we got a good one tonight. Dodgers Giants. Alfred and I both have the Dodgers winning, and it will be fun to say the least. So Alfred, appreciate you coming on the show. Look forward to having you back on next week, my man.
All right, I'll be here.
Yes, sir. That was Alfred Parsard Jr. of the Metropolitan Report. Good friend of mine, good friend of the show. He makes a lot of good points. I mean, when you're looking at a team in the Red Sox, in my Boston Red Sox, where you've got, first of all, you got a lot of guys that have been in this situation before. You've got Kike Hernandez came from the Dodgers. You got Hunter Renfroe was in the World Series last year, though he didn't, play that big of a factor with the Tampa Bay Rays. You're talking about guys that were on the 2018 team, guys like Sale and Evaldi and Rodriguez, the cornerstones of the franchise, Bogarts and Devers and guys like that. So when you have the right mix of young talent with veteran players, it's like any other sport, basketball, football. If you got that right mix, and especially if you got the coach or the manager in baseball, you've got an opportunity to win the whole darn thing. And Alex Cora has been outstanding. Back to the Kyrie Irving subject for just a second, because my man Grady Edwards has stopped by the show. He said probably really late in the show, had a long day at work, so I tapped out for a while. I don't like insulting people's intelligence, but Kyrie Irving is an idiot. He says what makes it worse is that he thinks he's enlightening us. Please. The guy's an a-hole with this mentality that he went to Duke, you didn't. Got some news for you, bro. You only went to Duke a year to play ball. My father went to grad for as long as you did there before dropping out. Like you did to get a higher paying job. Boo. Oh, that's John. So I think John's booing the Red Sox. I don't know if he's booing Kyrie. John's the Yankees fan. We'll forgive him for it. But John, by the way, is going to be on our NBA tip-off special Tuesday night. So be sure to stop by for that. It's going to be a good time with him. That's the thing, Grady, is I feel like the problem with Kyrie, like you said, he feels like he's, I guess, enlightening us. I think that'd be the right word to use. When you think you're the smartest person in the room and you're not, it can be really awkward. And he's a solo act. We know this. He's never, except when LeBron James, which by the way, I'm going to rank my top 10 players of all time just a second, but except for LeBron James, of all people, Kyrie Irving has never been a key contributor to a championship contending team. So he's a great player. There's no question about it. But you don't know what you're getting. You don't know if he's going to be there. You don't know if he's going to be hurt. You have no idea what you're getting on Kyrie Irving from a night-to-night basis. What else we got today before I get to Tampa Bay and eventually, I think that's it. So let's talk a little bit about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for just a second before I get to that. Student of the game, 225, Kyrie Irving is a selfish teammate. In a nutshell, yeah, that's exactly right. So let's get to Tampa Bay, Philadelphia tonight. Now, you got a Thursday night game, which is no question. It's must see because you've got obviously the defending champs. You got a Philadelphia team that's coming off a pretty impressive Week 4 win, in my estimation, going on the road to Carolina. Panthers were coming off a pretty embarrassing loss to my Cowboys, and so they're wanting to come in, make a statement against an inferior team. And Philadelphia just came in and outplayed them. As simple as that. They forced a few turnovers. The line for this game is -7 Tampa Bay. Now, that's on the road. I feel like something that's been kind of underreported. Tom Brady's had some issues with his throwing hand. Y'all know I love Tom Brady, but he's had some real problems. Now obviously last week he threw 5 touchdowns, so it might be the same case tonight. But I think going into Philly, short week, we know how crazy that crowd at Lincoln Financial Field can be, even though I can't stand Eagles fans. It's going to be a crazy environment. Super Bowl champs are coming to town. With that said, I will take the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win tonight 26-21, but I don't believe they're going to cover the spread. I don't, because Philadelphia's coming off a big win at home. They're feeling good about themselves after a road win over the Carolina Panthers. Tampa Bay's also feeling good about themselves. The problem is they can't stop anybody. The run defense isn't very good. The pass defense is almost last in the NFL. I mean, their secondary is just totally depleted. Tonight is going to be a real interesting game, I think, for Jalen Hurts. Because Jalen Hurts is a guy who we've all had the question for about 9 months now. Is he a franchise quarterback? Is he the Eagles' future moving forward? I've had my doubts. My gut feeling is he is not, because I've had worries with the turnovers. He's made some bad reads. Yes, he's mobile, but I'm about talking about Lamar Jackson. You got to be more than just mobile. And Lamar Jackson just threw for 400 yards, and people say he can't throw. Jalen Hurts has got to do, and I'll say he's got to be Lamar Jackson, but this isn't, thus far into the season, this is not the Tampa Bay defense of last year's playoffs. As I have a comment here from Student of the Game 225. He says, Jalen will scream, "It hurts" tonight in the post-game presser. Well, listen, Tampa Bay's defense can occasionally get after the quarterback. Now, the game where they had the most sacks was against New England, against an immobile quarterback. So, we all know Jalen Hurts can move around. But can he make those key throws to keep Philadelphia in the game? Tonight, I think he will. I'm not saying Tom Brady will struggle, but I am saying it is going to be a tough night for him in that Bucs offense. I do, however, have them winning this game 26-21, going to 5-1 on the season, but they do not cover the 7-point spread on the road. Before I get to my top 10 players, let me talk about the Monday night game, because after I celebrated my Red Sox beating the division rival Tampa Bay Rays to advance the ALCS, in case I don't know if I mentioned that, in the show in the last, hour and 3 minutes or so, but let's talk a little bit about the game that I watched after, and everybody else that wasn't watching the Red Sox game and Rays game was watching. That's, of course, the Baltimore Ravens and the Indianapolis Colts. Let me be brief on the Colts, because I think there's something to take away from this. The Indianapolis Colts, what's discouraging, this is the best game that Carson Wentz has played in probably 2 years against a really good Ravens defense. I mean, Carson Wentz, 25 for 35, 402 yards, 2 touchdowns, only had a QBR of about 64, but had a passer rating of 128.5. Like, he played amazing. And y'all know how I've been as critical as anybody of Carson Wentz. I can't hate on anything I saw Monday night. He was phenomenal. And the Colts still lost. And so, listen, when I look at the Colts' schedule moving forward, it's a mixed bag. I mean, there are some games that they should win. They play the Texans on Sunday. They should win that game easily. They go to San Francisco. Now, San Francisco's had some back and forth with their quarterbacks. Is it Trey Lance? Is it Jimmy Garoppolo? We'll see. They play the Titans. Titans, beat them in I believe it was week 3 or week 4. the Colts the Colts are playing the Jets after that. They should beat the New York Jets. Sorry, John and Alfred. They play the Jaguars after that. So there are some games that we expect Indianapolis to win. But after that Jaguars game, you go to Buffalo, and you got home against the Colts. So, and they got the Cardinals, by the way, later on the road. So there are some tough games on Indianapolis' schedule. And the good news for them, it's a bad division. It's a bad division that they play in the AFC South. Their only competition is the Tennessee Titans, and we don't know what we're getting from them on a game-to-game basis, to be fair. But they've got to win the games they're supposed to, and they're going to have to steal one or two of these, Tampa Bays or Buffalo's or Arizona games. They got to win at least one of those to get into playoffs. But we'll see. Is this the start of something from Carson Wentz? Maybe, but I haven't seen him play this well in years. So, student of the game 225 says the Ravens didn't win, the Colts gave it away. I'm about to get in Lamar Jackson in just a second. Grady says, do you think that Jalen Hurts is a starting caliber NFL team? I think you mean NFL quarterback, Grady. He says guy has his moments. And that's, when you say about a quarterback, guy has his moments, isn't that kind of the definition of a backup quarterback? Like a guy who can win you a game here and there, but you're like, I don't necessarily trust him to lead my franchise to the promised land. Now, to be fair to Jalen, this is not a Super Bowl roster. It's not even a playoff roster. But even on bad teams, like Joe Burrow last year showed us like, okay, yeah, he's the guy. Jalen Hurts hasn't really shown me that yet, but we'll see. John says, I think most people was watching the Monday Night Football. Yeah, you're probably right, John. Grady says, agreed, BMYJ, Indy should win unless Carson gets a case of the Jets. Or Carson gets a case of the Colts. John says he's going to get traded. He's going to be good, traded bait. And something else I feel like has been not talked about that much. They got Gardner Minshew on their roster. Do they turn to Gardner Minshew at any point? We'll see. Lamar Jackson. If you don't buy into Lamar Jackson at this point, I don't think you ever will. I really don't. The guy's won 85% of his games. Monday night's win tied Dan Marino for the most wins in NFL history before turning 25. Lamar Jackson has 34 wins. There's been a lot of narratives about Lamar Jackson the last few years. The first one is he isn't a franchise quarterback. Well, he proved that wrong in 2019 by being the unanimous MVP. Well, he can't win a playoff game. Well, he did that last year against Tennessee. Well, he can't lead teams from behind. He's not good playing from behind. He's won 3 games when trailing in the fourth quarter this year, including 2 where he's trailed by double digits in the fourth quarter. Those comebacks have been against Kansas City and the other night, a great Indianapolis Colts defense. Lamar Jackson, let me just give you the numbers because this is just, it's insane. Lamar Jackson, the first quarterback in NFL history to complete 85% of his passes in a 400-yard game. Not Brett Favre, not Peyton Manning, not even Tom Brady. Drew Brees, I'm surprised his name wasn't on that list because he threw for a lot of yards and had a great completion percentage. Nope. Lamar Jackson, first quarterback ever to do that. He's the first quarterback with 400 yards passing, 50 rushing, with no interceptions and 4 touchdowns. So he didn't turn the ball over when under pressure. And also, and this to me is the most impressive, the highest completion percentage in a 40-pass game. Lamar Jackson, in that game the other day, threw a grand total of 43 passes. He had a completion percentage of over 85%, which is the highest in NFL history in a game with over 40 passes. Down 19, down 16 in the fourth quarter, and Lamar Jackson led the Ravens to a comeback win. Again, if you're still not sold on Lamar Jackson, if he's got to win a Super Bowl, listen, he may do it this year. Who knows? That we got a long way to go. But if he's got to win a Super Bowl for you to buy in, then there's a lot of quarterbacks we can't buy into in that case. We can't buy into Josh Allen or Dak Prescott or Deshaun Watson if he ever comes back. You can't buy into Justin Herbert or Kyler Murray even. Like the only quarterbacks we can fully endorse is Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. That's really the only hurdle he has left to clear. He's won an MVP. He's won a playoff game. And he's a great thrower of the football, and he can play from being behind. Isn't that all the doubts that everybody had about Lamar Jackson season by season? Hey, I didn't think he'd work. I worried about his completion percentage. He wasn't the greatest thrower of the football at all. At Louisville, he was an insane athlete. He won the Heisman Trophy in 2016 for a reason. He's a great athlete. But I didn't see the precision and the arm strength. But you know what goes to show you? Work ethic. This dude, there's guys who like what football can do for them, and then there's other guys who just love the game of football. Lamar Jackson's one of those guys. There's no question about it. Grady says, I have no issue with Lamar. Easily a top 7 to 8. I think you mean quarterback. Easily a top 7 to 8 quarterback. I just think he'll fall off a cliff when he hits 31, 32. But even if that does happen, he's on track for a Hall of Fame career. He's Vic or Cam. He's better than Cam. I'm here to tell you he's better than Cam. Cam couldn't throw the football like this. Even Michael Vick, by the way. Michael Vick said recently when talking about Lamar Jackson, because obviously the comparison's been thrown around between those two. Michael Vick said, he's a better thrower of the football than I was when I first came in. Because Michael Vick explained, and this makes sense, that I knew I was so athletic that I kind of slacked a little bit in improving my throwing abilities. Lamar hasn't done that. He's gotten better and better and better. Same case with Josh Allen. Improvement each and every season. And that's the mark of a great quarterback. It's the mark of a leader, no question about it. So Lamar Jackson, y'all, is special. Put that in all caps too. Special. Okay. So the USA Today came out recently with their top 75 NBA players of all time. And in their top 10, it was really interesting. Their top 10 players ever from 10 to 1. Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Bill Russell, Magic Johnson, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. They had LeBron at number 1, which I thought was interesting. They had multiple sports writers voting on this whole deal. So I thought about doing, because I did it last year, and I made one small, tiny little change to the top 10. I rate my top 10 basketball players of all time. This is the first time I'm going to do it live. I did my top 15 players in the NBA a couple months ago. This is, ladies and gentlemen, my top 10 players in the history of the National Basketball Association. So let's get the music playing right here. Starting with number 10, Mr. Bill Russell. Bill Russell, ladies and gentlemen, won 11 rings. He was one of the greatest rim protectors of all time. Every time he matched up with the likes of the best centers in the game, including Wilt Chamberlain, he'd outplay him. He played better. He not shut him down defensively, but Wilt was out here averaging 50. And Bill Russell would hold him in check. And the difference between Bill Russell and a lot of the great players, a lot of the great talented athletic players, is he was the ultimate team leader. Never mind the fact that he had to play in a town like, Boston, which at the time was, it was the height of racism in the 50s and 60s. Bill Russell also became the first African-American head coach in NBA history. Truly just an incredible man, an incredible basketball player, and he is number 10 on my list. Sticking with centers, number 9, the Big Diesel. There's a lot of nicknames for him. We all know him as Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal. Name me the one player that was more dominant in their prime than Shaquille O'Neal. You can't. Multiple MVP awards. You're talking about a guy in Shaq who was a force of nature inside. They had to change rules because of him. 4-time NBA champion, 3-time finals MVP, 15-time All-Star. 15-time All-Star. 3-time All-Star game MVP, 2-time scoring champion. And again, most dominant player in his prime ever. There's no question about it. And what was great about Shaq is he knew his role. And Shaq on TV has criticized centers in today's league that's like, dude, stop shooting threes. You're dominant down low. These guys can't stop you. Couldn't stop me. Yeah, you gotta stop a guy who's 7 feet tall, easily 300 pounds. I mean, you're not gonna stop that. He had a good touch at the rim. Shaquille O'Neal is my 9th best player in NBA history. Sticking still with centers, let's go to number 8, Wilt Chamberlain. How do I not put a guy in the top 10 who once scored 100 points in a game, as you can see in this picture right here for the live audience? Wilt Chamberlain's a guy who won 2 NBA championships, won the Finals MVP in 1972, 4 regular season MVPs, 13-time All-Star, is a 7-time scoring champion, 11-time rebounding champion. He leaded the NBA in assists in 1968. First all-time in rebounds, 7th all-time in scoring. And like I mentioned, March 2nd, 1962, he scored 100 points in a game, which is just incredible. And he wasn't even the greatest free throw shooter in the world either. And he still put up that kind of performance. Wilt Chamberlain is number 8. All right, non-centers. Number 7, the greatest Celtic of all time, legend Larry Bird. Guy who won 2 NBA championships, 2 Finals MVPs. 3 NBA championships, 2 Finals MVPs. He three-peated as MVP from 1984 all the way to 1986. Went to 12 All-Star games. And like I said, greatest Boston Celtic ever. Something that goes somewhat under the radar about Larry Bird is this guy was the ultimate trash talker. I mean, he was... Dudes talk about him like, man, he was just brutal. Larry Bird, at the three-point shooting contest... Remember the one where he wore the jacket, didn't even take his warm-up off, where you couldn't see his jersey underneath? He walked into the locker room before the three-point shooting contest and told the other contestants, which one of you, blank, is going to come in second. And he went out there and backed it up. This dude was a killer. One of the greatest basketball players of all time. In his prime, he was simply unstoppable. One of the greatest shooters also in NBA history. Let's go to number 6, the greatest player at his position of all time, the greatest power forward, Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan, the big fundamental, as they called him, 5-time NBA champion, a 3-time Finals MVP. He won 2 regular season MVPs, 15-time All-Star, and the greatest Spur of all time. The guy who really launched the Spurs dynasty, because here's the thing. We all know Greg Popovich is one of the greatest coaches of all time. What has he done post Tim Duncan? Tim Duncan was the greatest ever at his position. If it weren't for a Ray Allen shot in Game 6 in 2013, could we make an argument for Tim Duncan as the greatest player ever? I mean, like Jordan, he'd have had 6 championships. He would have led a team that had never won a championship before to 6. Tim Duncan was something special, and in Tim Duncan fashion, he retired out of the blue after the 2015-2016 season. Tim Duncan is the 6th greatest player of all time in my mind. We move into the top 5, and this may shock some people. Number 5, Magic Johnson, the greatest player at his position ever, point guard. Magic Johnson's a guy who won 5 NBA championships, 3-time Finals MVP. He won 3 regular season MVP awards, just like his counterpart Larry Bird in the 80s. 12-time All-Star, 4-time assist champion, 5th all-time in assist, and as I mentioned, the greatest player at his position in NBA history. He is the gold standard for point guards. We can argue about Steph. We can argue about Chris Paul or John Stockton or Oscar Robertson. There's a lot of great players that have played the point guard position. None of them touch Magic Johnson. None of them. And so when you consider what he did, when you consider Showtime Lakers, I mean, listen, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was outstanding, but you bring Magic Johnson to that fold, he was the ultimate team leader, worked his butt off, and was one of the greatest players of all time. Magic Johnson is number 5. Number 4, in my mind, the 2nd greatest player his position ever, but the greatest player in the history of an iconic franchise, the Los Angeles Lakers, Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, 5-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP. He won the MVP in 2008. It's just a crime that he doesn't have more than one MVP. 18-time All-Star. He won the All-Star Game MVP 4 times. The MVP award of the All-Star Game is now named after Kobe. 2-time scoring champion, 4th all-time in scoring, the greatest Laker of all time. Kobe Bryant, we've heard the stories, of course, since he tragically passed over a year and a half ago. What made Kobe special, not that just he was Michael Jordan 2.0. Now, you see the side-by-side comparisons. It's kind of freaky. But what made Kobe Bryant special, it was the work. And it was the self-awareness too, because Kobe had that feud with Shaq. And they split, and Shaq went and won a championship in Miami. And Kobe could have stayed stubborn and said, no, I'm going to get my points. He scored 81 points in a game, which is second to Wilt's 100. Kobe did that in 2006 against the Raptors. He could have rested on his laurels and say, no, I can lead a team to a championship. He's like, no, I need help. Every great player needs help. Here comes Pau Gasol. Here comes 3 straight finals appearances. The last 2 of those ended with the Lakers hoisting the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Kobe Bryant, in my view, is the 4th greatest basketball player of all time. Number 3, the greatest center of all time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, you might be thinking, well, he was a Laker too. Listen, we all know. Kobe, Lakers' whole career. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar obviously won in Milwaukee 50 years ago until the Bucks finally did it this year. Kareem is a 6-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP, 6-time regular season MVP, 19-time All-Star, 2-time scoring champ, rebounding leader in 1976, 4-time blocks leader, the all-time scorer in NBA history. His record has stood for decades and is likely to be broken by LeBron James in the next few seasons. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, there is no debate about this, had the most unstoppable move of any player in NBA history. The skyhook, a guy who's 7'2" with the wingspan that he had, nobody's blocking the shot. It was virtually automatic. It's why he scored the amount of points that he did. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is, in my opinion, the 3rd greatest basketball player of all time. As I've said on this show many times, you can't have an intelligent basketball conversation about ranking players if Michael Jordan and LeBron James are not in your top 2. So at number 2, it is LeBron James. LeBron James has won 4 NBA championships. All 4 of those series, he won the Finals MVP. He is a 4-time regular season MVP, should have more. 17-time All-Star, 3-time All-Star Game MVP, 3rd all-time in scoring, and is the greatest small forward ever without a shadow of a doubt. You know, this notion that, oh, LeBron's not clutch. LeBron's actually hit more game-winning shots in the postseason in the last minute than any player in NBA history outside of Kobe. LeBron James has won a championship in 3 different destinations as the best player on all 3. He won the 2 championships as a member of the Miami Heat, and people said, well, he won because he had a super team around him, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh and company. He went back to Cleveland. Within 2 years, Cleveland, of all cities, was celebrating a sports championship. And they did it, to break my heart as a Warriors fan, down 3-1 against a 73-9 team. And what did LeBron James do games 5 through 7? Drop 41 in Game 5, drop 41 again in Game 6, and a triple-double in Game 7, which included the most iconic block in NBA history on my man, Andre Iguodala, in the last 2 minutes of that game. LeBron James is the 2nd greatest basketball player of all time, which of course means the greatest player in the history of the beautiful game created by James Naismith, the game of basketball, is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. 6-time NBA champion, 6-time Finals MVP, 5-time regular season MVP, should be more, 4-time 14-time, NBA All-Star, 3-time All-Star Game MVP. In 1988, he won Defensive Player of the Year. 10-time scoring champion, a 3-time steals leader. He is 5th all-time in NBA scoring. There's a lot of things that make Michael Jordan the GOAT, as we call it. He's the greatest two-way player ever. There's no debate. As I mentioned, a Defensive Player of the Year trophy. He led the NBA in steals 3 times. 10 times he was on the NBA All-Defense team. All the while giving your team 30. One season he actually scored averaged 37 points in a season. The mid-range was unstoppable. He was unstoppable when he got to the paint, unless he had to implement the Jordan rules, which the Detroit Pistons, of course, did back in the late 80s, early 90s. Led the Bulls. A laughingstock. They were called the Traveling Cocaine Circus, as we found out in the Last Dance documentary. Within a decade, Michael Jordan took that franchise and won an NBA championship. He had help, no question. Scottie Pippen, top 50 player ever. Phil Jackson, greatest coach ever. But when you consider all the variables, when you consider 1997 Game 5 against Utah, playing with food poisoning and still scoring 38 points, eventually leading the Bulls to a championship. The following year, Game 6, his last shot as a Chicago Bulls, won the whole darn finals against a more talented Utah Jazz team. In my view, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. So with all that being said, let's recap my top 10. At number 10, Bill Russell. Number 9, Shaquille O'Neal. Number 8, Wilt Chamberlain. Number 7, Larry Bird. Number 6, Tim Duncan. Number 5, Magic Johnson. Number 4, Kobe Bryant. Number 3, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Number 2, LeBron James. And number 1, Michael Jordan. So there you go. There's my list. There it is, right there. Got a few comments to look at. Student of the Game 225 says, LeBron over Jordan. LeBron over Jordan is blasphemy. LeBron had a better team on the Heat against Jordan's Bulls and still lost multiple times in the finals. Grady says Ben Simmons. I joked about Ben Simmons being at my my table, my top 5 dinner guests, dead or alive. I joked about that one. He's not coming to my house. I'm sorry. John says Shaq's the best center of all time. He's the most dominant center. There's no question about it. But before Jordan, Kareem was the GOAT. I don't think there's much of a question. If you're talking about an overall basketball career, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest ever. He was the best player in high school by far. He was the best player in college at UCLA by far. And he was the best player in the NBA. Grady says LeBron, the best all-around player, but greatest peak for peak, Jordan, without a shadow of a doubt. That's the thing. LeBron, yes, is a better overall player than Jordan. Scoring, it's kind of a wash. In some instances, LeBron's a better scorer. And in some respects, some numbers you look at, Jordan's the better scorer. You talk about, but LeBron's obviously the better distributor of the basketball. There's no question. He's the better rebounder. There's no question there. But you could say, Jordan's a better defensive player. So, like I said, I don't know how you could really put anybody above those two. I don't see it. Student in the Game 225 says no Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett's in my top 20 without a question. Maybe top 15. But he did have Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, Doc Rivers, a great Celtics roster, and he only got one championship out of it. Now, he was dominant for years in Minnesota, probably spent too many years in Minnesota before he finally did go to a championship organization and culture in Boston. But Student of the Game says, surprise you have Wilt over Bill Russell. I thought strongly about putting Bill Russell over Wilt, obviously due to rings, due to the fact that Bill Russell was no question the better defensive player. But I thought about it and I figured, you know what? Man scored 100 points in the game. I think at one point he averaged like 55 points in the season, which is just it's absurd. I mean, if you average 25 in a season, we're like, bravo. He averaged over double that. That's insane. Grady says it's going to be super hard for LeBron to catch Jordan. Is there anything he can do to catch him at this point to you? That is a good question. Those that have been following my show, at least since we went live, know that I said during last season that if LeBron won the 2021 NBA title, I'd actually put him over Jordan. And here's why. The Lakers last year were a mess. Anthony Davis couldn't stay healthy. Dennis Schroeder, we later found out, was a total locker room cancer. Mike Vogel really struggled with lineups. They finished 7th in the Western Conference in large part because LeBron had an ankle injury and was out a month toward the end of the regular season. If he was going to overcome all of that, be the 7 seed, be close to elimination against my Golden State Warriors in the play-in tournament, and lead the Lakers to a championship, that'd have been tough. Could Jordan have done that? I argue nobody could have done it. That's why I would have put LeBron over Michael, because it would have been so near impossible. And maybe that's not fair to have to go to those links. But listen, I think there is. I don't think it's the difference between LeBron and Jordan is like the Grand Canyon. But look, Jordan won more championships. Jordan was better defensively. He's the better two-way player. People talk about super teams. Listen, I don't think the Heat or the Bulls were super teams because, listen, Dwayne Wade was at the end of his prime. Chris Bosh was good, not what he was in Toronto. Didn't have to be what he was in Toronto, frankly. And, those Bulls teams, they were good. Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman in the latter part of their dynasty, Phil Jackson coaching that team. That's tough. Grady says he'd have to go back-to-back for me, and the reason the Lakers win. That's the only way for me. All right, that's fair, because if he does go back-to-back, then he would tie Jordan. And listen, a big reason it's so funny. LeBron is going to be 37 years old in December, and he's the only reason I like the Lakers this year at all to do anything, because he's got to deal with the health concerns of Anthony Davis. He's got to deal with a roster that is very poorly put together. It's the oldest. I said it a couple months ago. It's the oldest roster in NBA history. You add to it that of all the guys you had to have at the point guard position, you took Russell Westbrook, who's won a grand total of 1 playoff series since Kevin Durant dumped him in 2016, and who's a turnover machine, as we've seen in the playoffs this far. Listen, he's a great player, but can't shoot, doesn't move well off the ball. Like, it's just a bad fit. LeBron's the only reason I had the Lakers getting past the first round. I'm dead serious. Which is just insane. I think if he wins back-to-back, like you said, Grady, with this roster, yeah, Jordan couldn't have done that. No, nobody could have done that. So, listen, if he does that, because if he does go back-to-back also, he'll have doubled Jordan in finals appearances as well. It's an interesting conversation to have. And definitely one that's going to be brought up once again at this time, maybe a little earlier after the season in 2022. So we'll see. But yeah, like I said, I don't think the Lakers get past the second round this year. But it's a poorly constructed roster. But that's my top 10. That's my top 10 players in NBA history. If you're on YouTube or on Twitter, if you're on social media, let me go and put my my social media spots right there. At Carving It Up Podcast on Instagram, at Carving It Up Pod on Twitter. Facebook, you can find me, Bryson Carver, and you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, Carving It Up with Bryson Carver. So with that said, an hour and a half show today. It was fun. Grady, real quick, said, imagine if the Lakers helped you reunite Westbrook and Harden and KD. It would never happen, LOL. No, they'd have to just, yeah, I don't know what they'd do. But that is all the time we have for tonight's show. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Thank you so much, Alfred, for stopping by and talking some baseball. I feel good about my Red Sox. I got them winning in 6 games over the Houston Astros. Got a good one tonight. Good 2 games tonight. Dodgers, Giants, win or go home. 2 100-win teams from the same division. Here we go. That game, first pitch is after about 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific time in the Bay Area, the Yay area in San Francisco, California. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on the Philadelphia Eagles. I got Tampa, but they don't cover the 7-point spread. They win by 5. So hope everybody has a great evening. See y'all tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live, YouTube, Twitter. I'll talk about last night's game and predict Week 6, Sunday's action, Week 6 in the National Football League. Enjoy your evening. Stay safe. God bless you all. Peace out.